If you want more tips on the easy way to make shaker cards, stay tuned and I'll show you what I've learned recently. Hi, this is Sage Kimball and I'm the Mad Stamper with another technique video for card makers and paper crafters. I was making these snowman shakers this week and realized that the first video I made on shaker cards doesn't show you the technique for putting an image inside the window. This Star of Light shaker card from that first video has all the stamping on the top layer. The first step is to cut the opening for the shaker window from the card front. I'm using a piece of seaside spray measuring 4 by 5 1/4 inches. I'm using this layering circle die that is just under 2.5 inches in diameter. I center the die between the two sides of the cardstock with approximately the same space above the die. You need to leave plenty of room above the die cut for the glue that keeps the fill from shaking out. Now I can prepare the bottom layer. Since I'll be coloring the image with Stampin' Blends, I use a piece of Whisper White. The dimensions are 3 3/4 by 5 inches. That's a bit smaller than what I recommended in the first video, because I find that having a bit more wiggle room is helpful and doesn't detract from the finished card. I add some temporary adhesive to the corners of the white cardstock and center it on the wrong side of the top layer. The right side has the indentation from the die. With a symmetrical die cut, if I'm not careful, when I put the card together, I could mistakenly use the wrong side on top, and the alignment with the image will be off. I learned this the hard way. Now I can trace the inside of the circle with a pencil. Then take the layers apart. Because I'm coloring the inside all the way to the edges with Stampin' Blends, I want a large circle around the one I just drew. I've already cut the frame that I'll put around the circle on the finished card. I can just hold it in place and trace around it. The reason I do this is I found that when I only had the small circle, I ended up with some blank spots around the edges, and the larger circle will prevent this. However, if you aren't going to color a background like this, you don't need the second circle. Now I can stamp the image using Memento Tuxedo Black ink. Since it's a photopolymer stamp, I can easily position it so the snowman fits in the inner circle and he's standing up straight. If you're using a rubber stamp, you'll need to use the Stamparatus to get your image straight in the circle. I like to let the ink dry for a minute so it won't smudge. Then I can erase the inner circle, but I'm going to leave the outer one. The next step is to color the image, and here's one I colored earlier. Because snowmen are white, I only colored his hat and scarf, plus the little tree next to him. Then I used the light seaside spray Stampin' Blends in lines radiating out from his image to the large circle. The lines of color may look a little messy at this point, but they look great once the card is put together. Here's how I made the navy frame you saw earlier. I cut out a circle using the largest stitch circle die. Next, I cut the center of the circle out with the same die that I used on the card front. Now I'll show you how to assemble the shaker card. I've sped up some parts of the video so you won't get bored. You'll need a piece of craft foam the same size as the image piece, which is 3 3/4 by 5 inches. I like to use the thick foam, which is 1/8 inch thick instead of the thinner stuff. There's more room for the shaker fill that way. You'll also need a piece of window sheet 3.5 inches by 3.5. I could stamp on the card front at this point, or I can wait. The layer of craft foam will support the entire front of the card, and I can easily stamp on it after it's assembled. First, I'll center the foam on the back side of the card front. Then I can turn the pieces over and trace the circle with a pencil onto the foam. Next, I'll draw a second circle about 1/8 of an inch outside the first one. That's the line I'm going to use when I cut the foam. Next, I poke a hole in the foam with my snips and start cutting just inside the larger circle. I won't go outside of it. The hole just needs to be slightly larger than the die cut in the card front. If it's too large, the shaker fill won't show as well. Now I'll turn the card front over so the wrong side is facing up. And I'll adhere a piece of the window sheet with the tear and tape adhesive, covering up the die cut circle with the window sheet. I'll also add tear and tape to the corners and the lower edges of the foam. That's so when the card is assembled, the layers will be solidly put together. It's a little hard to see, but I've got 2 pieces up on top, 2 on the bottom, and 2 on the sides. Now I take the fine tip glue pen and add a bead of glue around the circle. I'm being careful not to get any glue on the inside edge of the circle. Next, I spread the glue flat using the back of a plastic spoon so it won't squish out when the layers go together. After I remove the liner from the tear and tape, I can center the foam onto the back of the card front. If any glue got into the inside of the circle, now it's time to wipe it off. Now this glue will take a while to dry, so I'll set it aside with some weight on it to be sure I get a good bond. Now that the glue is dry, I run the embossing buddy around the inside of the circle so that any glue that dried there will lose its stickiness. Then I'll add the fill. I'm using these cool snowflake sequins from the holiday catalog. I like plenty of fill, so I add a few pinches. These sequins stick to everything, and I can't ever get all of them corralled into the shaker window. But hey, a few snowflakes floating around makes me smile. Now I can add adhesives to the exposed side of the foam the same way I did on the other side. First comes some tear and tape, then the fine tip glue pen, then I'll spread it out with a spoon. After I remove the liner from the tear and tape, I can put the image piece on top of the foam. I'll let it dry again with some weight on it. After it dries, I can adhere it to the card base with some snail. Here's what my finished card looks like. I hope you're inspired to try a shaker card in your craft room. They're a little more work than a regular card, but they'll fascinate you and whoever you give them to when you're finished. I'll add some links under the video for the Stampin' Up! Products I used in this tutorial, in case you're interested. Thanks for watching. Please like this video, share it with your friends, and leave me a comment. For more inspiration and instructions, be sure to sign up for my newsletter at www.stampingmadly.com. Visit me on Facebook and Pinterest, and don't miss another great video. Subscribe to the Mad Stamper YouTube channel now.